There are two schools of thoughts in the U.S. when it comes to tacos. On one hand, you have the Taco Bell. The Taco Bell thought is simply that they invented tacos. And on the other side, you have the real tacos. Tacos that you would find in taco stands in Mexico City or taquerias in Los Angeles or other parts of the world that have this style of taco. And I used to think that it wasn't really a big deal. I used to think that this didn't matter. But the older that I got, the more I started to see that it was a thing. And it led me down several paths, some with anger and some with sadness. So today on the show, I want to talk a little bit about this taco, two schools of thoughts. That one is the American taco, and the other is just a taco. And how this sometimes creates a bias that really separates us and drives this shaft between the cultures. My name is Isidro Salas, and welcome to 10,000 Tacos. "10,000 Tacos" is a podcast of what I like to call growing up tacos. They're short stories and experience around growing up in the taco truck. And so this podcast is trying to look at the world, the taco world, through the eyes of a taquero. I was raised by taqueros, and thank God I grew up that way because it's helped me realize who I am, where I'm going. At the same time, I get to pay a tribute to my family and my parents. So welcome to the show. As we mentioned earlier, the taco bias, it's creating a wedge between a couple of cultures. And this taco bias is there's many reasons for it, but I think it starts with the fact, or it's not a fact, but it revolves around the idea that there are two different tacos. There's the American taco, and then there's the real taco. And I know in that statement, it sounds like I'm already picking a side. I know you're not going to be surprised. There are tacos, and then there's everything else, right? So today, I want to talk to you a little bit about why this little thing seems to exist. Excuse me there. I'll begin with this thought or this statement that I hear a lot. Often enough, when I'm out and about and I'm talking about my podcast and people think that I'm an expert, right? Because I talk about it in a podcast. Well, I don't think I'm an expert, but I do know a lot about tacos because of my background. I grew up making them, so I know what tacos are. If we weren't successful as a family in a family business, then we would have been out of business. So the fact that we were in business for such a long time, I think lends itself to that I do know something about tacos. So yes, a lot of people will ask me, and though I'm not an expert, again, I do give an opinion that matters. And what I run across a lot is this question. This question that people ask me when they first meet me, and that is, what do you prefer? Do you prefer soft shell taco or a hard shell taco? And I know this is not their fault. They may not know this, but that's a FACO question, right? Because I don't believe that a soft shell taco exists. I mean, it just doesn't exist, right? What is a soft shell? It may exist in seafood, right? There's a crab that has a soft shell and you eat it with the shell. I've had that before. But a soft shell taco does not exist. It is just simply a tortilla and the ingredients that makes it a taco. So I think that the bias starts here. When people ask that question, what is it that makes them ask that question, where there is a difference between the two? And there isn't a difference. I think that started with the beginning of a Taco Bell. Now, I'm not here to bash Taco Bell. I've eaten it before. It's food, and it's a great price, and I'm not here to bash it. But it's not real Mexican food. Yet, time and time again, when U.S. consumers are asked their favorite Mexican restaurant, they will name Taco Bell. I blame their marketing department, but I also blame the fact that so many people are naive to know or to think that this is true. So I think that the taco bias starts with that. When Taco Bell started making this food many years ago, they made it out to seem as if they were the ones who invented the taco. And there were people, innocent people, who had no idea that this was happening. And I know this because I almost got in a fight one time with somebody because they were defending Taco Bell. Now, it didn't matter. Now, when I say I almost got in a fight, this guy was a lot bigger than I was. At the time, I wasn't doing CrossFit because it wasn't as popular. So I wasn't going to fight him, but I ended up firing him because I was his boss. Not because he loved Taco Bell, but because, All right, when they asked me, who should we get rid of? I'm like, get rid of that guy. Anyway, I was going to fight this guy, and he got a little, chested with me because he said Taco Bell was really good. Now, that's not the problem I had, because you could think whatever you want. If you like something, you like feelings. I've said that before. It's what you feel. It's what you like. What you put in your mouth. If you like it, if you love it, that's not what the problem is. The problem came is when he said it was Mexican food and that there was no other place that sold better Mexican food. I thought he was joking. I thought he was joking when he said that, but he wasn't joking. And it got a little more serious when I said, no, I disagree. I grew up making tacos and we sold them and they were pretty damn good. And he's all, well, I bet you that Taco Bell tacos were a lot better than yours. And that's what blew my lid. That's because he was being serious about that. Even though he had never tasted the tacos that my parents and my family sold, he was convinced that Taco Bell was way better than that. And I was like, if he just said that now I probably would have fought him. Because like I said before, I work out. I go to CrossFit. I have arms, big arms. No, I don't. Just kidding. I'm inflating myself. So that's why I started to think and realize that there was a problem. Now, this happened about 20 years ago. So I thought that was just an isolated incident. But my thoughts go way back to that point because nothing has changed. As a matter of fact, it's gotten worse. Now that, with the combination of social media and how people express themselves and how fast information travels and how companies use social media to market and disseminate all this information, people are believing that. And then another part is that for some reason, tacos are becoming a lot more, or they're already popular as it is, but now the discovery of the real taco, because there's a lot more food trucks out there's a lot more taquerias, and people are now, for the first time, tasting these great things and going, oh my God, there are two separate tacos. So I think that because of the Taco Bell thing, the soft shell needed to have its own name. And people started referring to that. And like many things that happen, when somebody refers to something and it just keeps rolling, nobody stops it, that's where it starts happening. And the reason I notice this is because I'm very keen, and especially with myself, right? When I make a mistake and with language or something, and I've made some mistakes on this podcast. I've used the wrong grammar or I've used the wrong sentence structure. Now, thank God there's editing, but sometimes I've left them in there because, hey, I made the mistake and I'll own that. But I started noticing this a long time ago where people just blur out a name and it grabs on. a perfect example of this, and I've had this ever since I was in college when I failed a class because I didn't learn this concept, so I forced myself to learn this. And one of the things back then that I learned to really know what it was antisocial. Well, people used to think that antisocial meant somebody who was shy, somebody that just wasn't with the party. And that's not what antisocial means. Antisocial means actually a psychology term. I might be chopping it up, but it really, you don't want to be called antisocial. An antisocial person is someone who goes against society. And someone who goes against society are people who kill other people, people who con, people who lie on a habitual basis. Those are antisocial people. But today you like, I'm not on Facebook, so that makes me antisocial. No, it's not. So the same thing has happened with this soft shell taco saying. And there's no such thing as a soft shell taco or soft shell tortilla for that matter. And people ask me, well, why does that bother you so much? Why does it bother you? And I started to ask myself, well, why does it bother me? It bothers me because the minute that we start giving these names, that's when you start diminishing where it came from. And at some point, if we don't put a stop to that, the original thing may no longer be original. And I've thought about this a lot. I know it's difficult to answer, but I go really, really deep as to why I hate that phrase soft shell taco. Look, I even say it like a gabacho, soft shell taco. You know, and my sister brought this up some time ago. She's like, hey, you know, why do you say tacos? I even have that damn bias. I say it like a gabacho, tacos. I'm even guilty of it. But the reason why, again, I believe that when you have these terms, they diminish where it came from. I know that to make a tortilla, the tortilla is what I'm really referring to, because you cannot have a taco without a tortilla. And people could argue with me all they want, but you cannot have a taco if you don't have a tortilla. So the tortilla is the star here. And the tortilla is not a soft shell. The tortilla is just a tortilla. It comes from masa. And how is masa made? Masa is made with the key ingredient of corn. And the way corn starts, you cannot just grind it up and make masa out of it so that you can make tortillas. You have to go through a process that is thousands of years old. I mean, we're talking maybe 10,000 years. Some have argued that the corn was discovered or invented to make masa about 10,000 years ago. 10 seconds later, the taco was born. So I actually agree with that. But anyway, every day, thousands of women and some men, but mostly women, make tortillas by hand. It's a very, very delicate and time-consuming process. Even with today's technology, it's still a very time-consuming process to do it right. This process is called nixtamal. And it's simply turning the corn into masa. But it's not that simple. And once you turn it into masa, then, hey, you could actually make tamales or you can make tortillas. They're two separate processes, right? Nixtamal, right? That's where it gets its name, tamales. But to make tortillas, there's a bit of a difference. You can't use the same masa to make tamales and tortillas. And maybe I'll bring somebody on the show to explain that process. Right now I'm not. But to go back to it, every day this happens. And again, even though we have modern machinery that makes this process a lot easier, it's still a very arduous process. We still have people who make them by hand. And some of the reasons behind that is simply because they are in poor communities that can't afford the machinery. They live in rural towns and poor areas of other parts of the world. And I think this is special. I think this is very special, and it makes it sacred. It makes the tortilla sacred. So when companies like Taco Bell make products that undermine this process and therefore diminishes that process and just, a taco shell to make these tacos it bothers me. On a more personal note, about a half a dozen years ago, right, I wanted to make tortillas by bulk before I found out the real process. But anyway, I wanted to do that, and I wanted to start a little business. And as I was thinking about what are the things that I needed, both the machinery, the funds, and everything, I also started thinking about the people that I needed to hire if this thing got big. And like many ideas, if you have one, you could just start, I started mind wandering like crazy. And at some point I got to I'm going to need a finance guy. So I thought about one of my dear friends who has a finance background. And it took me a long time to muster up the strength to call him to let him know about the idea, because we have a very special relationship. Like many of my friends, I tend to introduce a lot of humor. So when I talk to a lot of people, sometimes humor gets in the way of the seriousness. And I've been told that before, and I'm trying to work on it. But anyway, I was afraid he wasn't going to take me serious. And sure enough, the conversation started going there. And as I was mentioning to him that I wanted to open up a tortilleria, and perhaps I could just buy the equipment and start it from my home. And as I would start growing, then I would have to hire somebody. Would he be interested in helping me out and to do that? And he sounded like, oh yeah, no, that's a pretty cool idea. And I said, yeah, man, I'm gonna try to do it by purchasing a machine and doing them out of my house, doing them from home, and then distributing them. The idea was to first start in making them, and then at 5 o'clock hand them out to people, to my neighbors, and say, hey, these are free, and these, enjoy them with your meal. And then eventually, as they got more popular, people would come over, and by the time they'd come over, I'd have my grill, so I could make some al pastor, make some tripas, some carne asada, and then people would say, hey, and so I had this idea, and I said, at some point, start it from my house. And he stops me in my tracks, and he says, well, I have a tortilla maker at home. And I said, oh, wow. And he looks at me and he says, yeah, I call her mom. And of course I start laughing, right? You effer. Because his mom used to make tortillas all the time. And that was one of the favorite parts. When I would taste her tortillas, they were just fabulous. There's no other way to describe them. She'd make them from scratch, and they would come out just uniquely like her. Every time I went to go visit him, when he lived at her house, it was just a magical moment. Every time you'd walk in the house, you could smell that. And we lost her earlier this year, and that was a very tough time for my friend. It was a very tough time for his family, and just watching him go through that process was very painful. But I just remember thinking that every time a person like her passes away, it's like a tortilleria closing its doors forever. That knowledge and that experience goes with her. And that's why it's important to me. It's very important to me that we continue some of these traditions, that we take them and we hold them in our hands and in our hearts, because that's what makes these tacos taste great. It's not just the food, it's not just the meat, it's not just the cilantro, the salsa. All those things are important, but it's how they're made, where they come from. It's very important that we continue to hold on to those things, because some of the people will leave us, the people that make them. At some point, they're going to be gone. None of us make it out of here alive. So that's why it matters to me that there is no such thing as a soft shell tortilla. They're just tortillas. and they're just tacos, and they're freaking good. Thanks for joining us on this latest episode of 10,000 Tacos. So much appreciate the fact that you give us time. I do apologize that we didn't publish our episode last week. It should have been. A few things happened, and but that's what life is, right? Yeah, I said it in the past that when life throws you a cow, you make carne asada, and you make that pretty good. So again, I apologize that I didn't publish this when I was supposed to. I hope you forgive me. Please join us for our next episode. And until then, I'm Isidro Salas. And this is 10,000 Tacos.